it has been brought to my attention that I maybe should have spent a bit more time in my Which Final Fantasy Should You Start With video on why I believe Final Fantasy IV to be the worst of the bunch. Hello world, my name is Atticus, and let's talk about Final Fantasy IV. First things first, I'm going to summarize the entire game, so there will be spoilers. I'll try to keep them contained to the summary section of the video, but if you want to experience Final Fantasy IV yourself, you might want to play it and then come back. My first playthrough took just under 20 hours, so it's not too long. And with the spoiler warning out of the way, let's talk about Final Fantasy IV. To do that, let's talk about Kingdom Hearts for a bit, mostly as an example. When creating something, you can't be sure how much people will like it until it's out. So, when that something is as expensive as a game, it makes sense to keep it relatively contained. Kingdom Hearts, the first one, works pretty well as a standalone title. It tells you everything you need to know in order to understand the story, and the ending, while open-ended, serves to wrap things up in a nice and optimistic way. While the end of the game implies another story to be told, the secret movie implies a solution to that story, even if we don't get to see how it plays out. Kingdom Hearts, of course, did very well and was able to continue on, which then presents a new problem. How do you continue a standalone story, and more importantly for our purposes, how do you create a sequel that feels both familiar and distinct? A sequel has the unique burden of defining the direction a series will take. It's a tough job. Kingdom Hearts circumvented this problem by leaving enough story to continue on with Chain of Memories, and by making Chain of Memories an entirely different kind of game. With Final Fantasy, we have the first game makes its debut, and then the second title attempting something wildly different. That didn't work so well, so they make 3. A good game, but a bit too similar to the first one. Another shot at the drawing board, and we get 4. A more refined version of what they attempted with 2. And that's it. 4 is a series-defining game, and it's not hard to see why it's so well received. Back when the games were first released, the West got 4 as the second entry, instead of localizing 2 or 3. They skipped right to this one as the series-defining sequel in the West. So what's so good about 4? Why work on localizing that entry over the other 2 sequels? It's a beloved game, far more than I expected obviously, so let's go over it. For this exercise, I've played through the game again to ensure it's fresh in my mind and to attempt to give it a second, fairer shake. We begin aboard an airship, one of the Red Wings under the command of the Dark Knight Cecil, our protagonist for this game. Chatter from the crew reveals that our hero is upset with their recent mission, where they attacked innocent people to steal one of the crystals, a plot device especially abundant in the early games of the series. Crystals hold immense power, and Cecil attempts to reaffirm their actions by claiming that another country even possessing one is a threat to Baron, their home. It's not a good argument, but our hero has to reconcile his actions with his morals somehow. Monsters suddenly attack, and we learn 2 more things about Cecil. He cares deeply for the men under his command, and he is extremely powerful, single-handedly taking out both waves of enemies without any help from the soldiers or even the player. We also learn that monsters have been increasingly a problem. Upon returning to Baron, we are greeted by a man named Bagan, who seems far less perturbed at the idea of raiding a defenseless place like Mysidia, and even scolds our apparent pity. He leads us all the way to the throne room, having us wait outside the door while he whispers poison into the king's ear about how Cecil no longer trusts the king, but so long as Cecil obeys, the king doesn't care. It seems like our hero will indeed meekly obey, but he pauses as he begins to leave after handing over the crystal, which is apparently far smaller than it first appeared, and steals his resolve, turning around and announcing his misgivings. Cecil is still fiercely loyal to his king and country, but that loyalty does not blind him to his own sense of morality. But the King of Wherein has no room for people like Cecil in his army. At even the slightest hint of independent thought, the king strips him of his command and sends him off on another task on his own. He is to slay a beast in Mist Valley and deliver a, quote, bomb ring. The mission is dubious at best. Either Cecil is killed by this mysterious beast, or he causes some wanton destruction, and both seem like decent options for the king. Perhaps if the beast doesn't get him, the ring will. A character named Cain barges into the room, defending Cecil, and is assigned to the same mission. We're not sure yet who Cain is, but he's important enough to be able to storm into the throne room unannounced, but not so important that he can't be sent on a suicide mission. The two are forced out of the room, and Cecil offers apologies to Cain for getting him tangled in this mess. Cain offers optimistic hope that successfully completing this mission will bring things back to normal. Cecil cannot bring himself to agree. With a daunting task in the morning, Cain goes off to prepare, and we are given our tutorial screen. In the Pixel Remaster, the version I'm playing, that's just a list of controls. We can go speak to Cain again, where we learn that Cecil mastered the Dark Sword on the king's orders, but did so to protect Wherein rather than plunder others, and that Cain became a dragoon to follow in his late father's footsteps, who died when Cain was young. Apparently, had Cain become a Dark Knight, he could hold a higher rank in the army. We wander around the castle a bit and meet Rosa, who chases after us. There's a familiarity between the two, but upon seeing Cecil's doubts and how upset his most recent mission has left him, she gives him some time alone, promising to visit later. We also meet this game's Cid, who tells us not to worry Rosa anymore, and calls the crew of the Red Wings goons, making clear his stance on Whereин's military affairs, despite seeming to directly contribute to the war effort by making and maintaining their airships. The king has actually ordered him to make an airship specifically for murder, perhaps the fantasy equivalent of a bomber, and given that Cid is still in the castle, I have to imagine he agreed to it. He also mentions that the king has been peculiar for a while, which better explains the fierce loyalty our caste has for their country. We can assume that Wherein used to be a more or less peaceful nation, with a good king at its helm. But something has changed, and our heroes are beginning to recognize that. We return to our room, and unable to sleep, Cecil drops some exposition instead. The king used to be a chivalrous knight who raised Cain and Cecil as if they were his own, and despite his doubts about the direction the king and kingdom are headed, Cecil recognizes that he can't betray his king, the man who might as well be his father. Rosa visits, as promised, and gets Cecil to talk about what's on his mind. He feels remorse and disgust for his actions in Mysidia, killing innocent people, and fears for the future. Not only might he have to do this again, but as a Dark Knight, he won't even be able to feel that remorse. Rosa offers what I can only assume to be an empty promise that things will be fine, that he won't lose this piece of himself, his slowly crumbling humanity. Cecil calls himself a hopeless coward, sure of what should be done, but unable to bring himself to do it. Rosa says that the Cecil she knows would never whimper like this. Not the Cecil that she loves. She hasn't promised to come back in one piece because I guess the bomb ring isn't a red flag for anyone else in this castle. And Cecil states that as a Dark Knight, they can't be together. That's a lot! And we're not even out of the prologue. So let's take a quick break and digest. Are Dark Knights Catholic priests? Why can't they be together? I assume it's more the gradual loss of emotion and humanity. They can probably be together, but Cecil will slowly lose the capacity for love. I'm not entirely sold on their relationship at this point, though. This is probably the worst day of Cecil's life so far. He was ordered to go slaughter innocent people and steal a crystal from the people of Mysidia. At this point in the game, we're not sure the significance of the latter action, but prior games have taught us that the crystals contain vast power, so it's probably a big deal. After bearing his soul, all his doubts and fears, Rosa's response is, "The Cecil I know wouldn't whimper like this," or in fewer words, man up. That's a categorically bad response here, and she can leave her toxic masculinity at the door. Speaking of the events of Mysidia, I'm surprised we didn't get to play through it ourselves, instead only seeing it through a flashback. It seems like a great place to have a tutorial, and making us party to that tragedy would help us connect to Cecil's struggles here more. Imagine a slightly different version of this game, where you fire it up excited for a new Final Fantasy story, but realize over the course of the tutorial that the king had lied to you. Mysidia isn't a dangerous place. This game introduces the active time battle, something we'll see in a bit, but basically allows the game to have a blend of active and turn-based combat by granting turns once the ATB gauge fills up. Important for our purposes is, if you take too long to figure out your turn, the enemy might move quicker than you and sneak and attack him. If you just sit, they could get multiple turns in. Imagine realizing that when the enemy does get turns in, they do little or no damage. Imagine just sitting there, letting them get turn after turn and come to the horrific understanding that these people are absolutely no threat, that there is no justification for your actions here. I can sorta understand why they might not want to put a prospective player through that personally first thing, but it seems to me like that's where the game should have started. Morning comes, we meet up with Kane and get the text scroll summarizing the cutscenes we just read, and making sure to explain that Baron has the strongest air force of relatively new technology, and suggests that the crystals are only a weird light source that the king should have no real reason to covet. We get to the world map, and it's no eternal wind, but 4 does have a good overworld theme. We finally get to fight, witnessing the ATB in action, and I don't think Cecil has any of the cool abilities he used in the opening cutscene fights. This is either an instance of the game showing us something cool that we'll be able to do later, a cool gameplay narrative trick where Cecil's doubts and remorse have stopped him from utilizing the Dark Sword's true power, or a mistake. Our objective isn't far, and no monster that appears is individually a challenge for our pair of heroes, though the sheer volume of enemies you can meet if you're not sure where to go might prove overwhelming. The beast we are to slay ends up being a mist dragon, which serves as a lesson in the new ATB system. The dragon has 2 forms, a dragon one and a mist one. As a dragon, it can attack either Kane or Cecil, but the damage it deals rarely exceeds 10. Our heroes have over 200 health. As Mist, it can't attack directly, but if it is itself attacked, it can retaliate, dealing substantially more damage to both party members. In addition, it takes no damage in this form. So the idea is to attack while it's a dragon and just wait while it's Mist. Voila, you've learned active time battling. We arrive in the Village of Mist, and immediately the bomb ring releases bombs, the Final Fantasy monster, little red balloons with a tendency to explode. Our heroes are somehow surprised by this, and if they weren't protagonists, I wouldn't believe them. Through the fire and destruction, the cries of a child ring out. Her mother has died, but not on account of the recent explosions. She's died because her dragon has died. Kane explains to us what summoners are, people who can summon great beasts and are apparently mortally linked. Cecil announces that they are the murderers, in front of the Grieving Child. I'm sure she'll be fine with it. Kane, finally, deduces the king's plan: kill all the summoners in the Village of Mist, and figures, in for an inch, in for a mile, let's kill the kid. Cecil is reasonably against the idea, and finally draws the line of his subservience. Even if it means betraying the king, betraying the man who may as well be his father, he will not kill a child. In the face of Cecil's resolve, Kane reveals that he agrees. He also does not want to do this. I am unconvinced. I get the feeling that Kane would have gone along with whatever Cecil decided to do. Deciding on treason over murder, Kane begins to hatch a plan for the two of them to go against the mighty nation of Wherein, and Cecil worries for the safety of the kid they have made an orphan, and whose hometown they've destroyed. Kane, rather aggressively, agrees, and they attempt to kidnap the girl to safety. She does not want to go with her mother's murderers. So much so that we enter into a battle with her, where she summons something that splits the land, separating Kane from us. We wake up in a forest clearing conveniently on the other side of a mountain range from Wherein, with the now unconscious girl, and head out into the world with no real plan. Wandering through the desert for a bit, we find an oasis town, and the kind innkeep allows us to stay there, free of charge due to the state of the unconscious girl. Cecil's concern must be writ plain since the innkeep asks no questions. The girl wakes up briefly but won't speak to Cecil. For a dark night, our hero is surprisingly conscientious of his own and others' feelings. He didn't know what he was doing when he killed the dragon or stepped foot into the Village of Mist, but his actions have had disastrous consequences. He says he understands if she can't forgive him, but to please let him protect her. A request that quickly becomes very relevant, as that night, Knights of Wherein find the two of them. The continent is, let's say, sparsely populated, but I'm still surprised at how quickly they found us, and that they're even searching for us. The squad of 4 soldiers are no match against Cecil's monstrous strength and are swiftly repelled. We finally learn the girl's name as she tells us it's Rydia, and she joins our party. With no clear idea of what to do, we talk to people around town who tell us that a girl from Wherein was found passed out on the outskirts of town and was brought to someone's house to recover. This girl just so happens to be Rosa, but she has desert fever, an illness that can only be cured by stealing a ruby from an antlion. Sure. We find an old man in a cave who is searching for his daughter, Anna, who ran off with a bard because the old man didn't approve of their relationship. He also has a vague sense that something bad is going to happen sometime. Oh boy. I can't say I've been endeared to Sage Tele either, but Cecil recognized him, so I guess that counts for something. Tele enlists our help with killing an octopus blocking the only route to Damcyan, where Anna and an antlion happen to be, and we go through the cave. Rydia is incredibly weak at this point, which does a great job of showcasing just how strong Cecil is, and makes each fight really feel like Cecil is protecting Rydia. It's great narrative, but it's not great gameplay. Every enemy dies in one swing of Cecil's sword, or 2 if the RNG runs low. And tucked safely in the back row by default, Rydia isn't in any real danger. After a single fight, she learned some spells, like Cure, and was never in danger again. The fights at this point are tedious. Nothing can be a real threat to Cecil because anything that could would one-shot Rydia. And when Tele joins, he can cast Thunder on all enemies, which one-shots a whole encounter. They try to get around this with some more gimmicky enemies, like a weird blob that takes much less damage from magic and auto-cures itself after being hit by it. But it doesn't attack or anything. So after Tele wipes the rest of the field, you can just set everyone to attack and hit the auto button until you either kill it or it runs away. So to create a facsimile of difficulty and danger, the game just throws a lot of enemies at you. At this stage of the game, combat, one of the main gameplay aspects, is just boring and tedious. We reach the Octomammoth, the monster keeping Tele from reaching Damcyan, on his own, and while its health pool is much larger than anything else in this cave, I'm still able to set the battle to auto about halfway through with no problem. I should have tried seeing if Tele could solo it. We exit the cave and see Damcyan on the horizon just in time to watch as 3 Red Wing airships destroy the castle. It looks like they fly by and drop bombs, so I guess Cid finished that airship he mentioned the king asking for, and then made 2 more. And either all airships from Baron are red, or the crew of the Red Wings were a bit more okay with wanton murder than they led on in their opening scene. We search the castle for survivors and find Anna's still body. The bard she ran off with creeps out from behind a pillar, and Tele flies into a rage, switching us over to the battle screen, though we have no input on how these events play out. He calls the man a spoony bard and engages in some slapstick, hitting him with his staff instead of, casting magic at him. It turns out Anna isn't dead, as she calls out to her father to stop. Anna reveals that Edward the Bard is actually the Prince of Damcyan, and Edward reveals that it was, in fact, the Red Wings who attacked, and their commander is now a man by the name of Golbez, a name that Cecil does not recognize. They came to steal the Crystal of Damcyan, and everyone, including Anna, risked their lives to save Edward's during the assault. Anna then dies. Edward cries at losing the love of his life, and also his family, and probably most of the people he's ever known. Tele tells him to, quote, "stop your sniveling." Tele is also feeling his emotions, though they manifest differently from Edward's, as he swears revenge on Golbez and goes off on his own, refusing Cecil's help. Rydia also tells Edward to stop crying, and that while she lost her mom, she's not going to cry anymore. And I know this is an old game, but goodness, let people feel for a second. Edward is still in the depths of grief, so 3rd time's the charm, Cecil slaps Edward and tells him to start acting like the king he now is. It is not this that calls Edward to action, however. It's Cecil's request for help in curing Rosa's illness. Edward immediately recognizes the relationship between Cecil and Rosa, and wishing to spare Cecil the grief he now feels, he agrees to help. He also reveals he has a hovercraft, and listen, I know Final Fantasy loves to have an interesting blend of sci-fi and fantasy. Even the first one had a weird robot superboss enemy thing, but the hovercraft feels weird. You wanted a progression block on the overworld, like the older games have, but you didn't want to do the canoe again. But the hovercraft is just a worse version. I guess you don't have to fight random encounters in it? Anyway, we find the cave. It's a lot longer than it needs to be. I like how Edward runs away if his health falls too low, and the boss is beaten with auto-on from the start. Edward does nothing in the fight. We steal the Sand Ruby and return to Rosa, who wakes up instantly, though a persistent cough hints that she's not yet fully recovered. We discover that Golbez was appointed by the king himself, and that Rosa believes Golbez to be manipulating the king and stealing the crystals for his own gain. We learn that the final 2 crystals are in Fabul and Troya, and that Fabul is probably next on Golbez's list, but the path is blocked by ice. Rosa asks Rydia if she can cast fire, to which Rydia responds that no, she can't, despite it being a basic spell. Rosa is surprised and states that as a summoner, she should be able to. Geez, Rosa, I can't think of a single traumatic event that could be keeping Rydia from casting fire. Rosa insists on joining our party despite her cough and the whole having just been direly ill, and we let her come along. Edward, unable to sleep, heads outside and plays his harp and talks to Anna's ghost. It was better when 2 did it. Look, I've not spent enough time with these characters to get personally attached to them. I barely knew Anna alive. She's the 4th person to tell Edward to fight, despite the fact that he is clearly a lover, not a fighter. She disappears and Edward is left with directionless resolve. His attacks land in combat now, though, so that's nice. We head out for Fabul and encounter the random block of ice impeding our progress. Is this ever explained? When they mentioned the path was frozen over, I figured we'd be heading far to the north, but this looks the same as everywhere else. There's not even snow on this mountain. Rosa and Edward get Rydia to try casting fire. taking callous disregard of Rydia, saying she hates fire, and Cecil revealing that her village burned down like 4 days ago. But I guess a few forceful words from some strangers was all it took to get past that trauma. We aren't even through the first part of the game, and I am so tired. I do not care for these characters. I actively dislike some of them, and I don't find the story all that compelling. Our heroes have no plan, and while a few of them have displayed great power, mostly Cecil and Rydia, once when she summoned Titan, they don't seem like they could hold up against the entire military might of the most powerful nation in the immediate vicinity. The heroes of 2 were similarly outmatched, but they planned and connived, biting at the Empire's heels constantly. But the people want to know why Final Fantasy IV is bad, so I'll soldier on. We meet a Fabul monk at the top of the mountain and are treated to another cutscene battle. He's able to clear out 3 goblins on his own, but needs help with a bomb that turns into like a genie and then explodes into more bombs. Is this where the bomb ring came from? Auto attack works just fine up through the first 2 phases. I think I could have left it on for the whole fight, but I turned it off to try and get some heals in. There's a comment someone left on the original "which should you start with" video. I can see it in YouTube Studio, but not under the actual video, so I don't know if they or YouTube got rid of it. But they claim that 4 is one of the best games unless you, quote, go man-child every time you wipe. And I'm flabbergasted by this because, for one, Final Fantasy games aren't really known for their difficulty, and 2, I think 4 is one of the easier ones. There's a bit of trial and error in figuring out how best to deal with each enemy, like zombies for example, but for most encounters, I can set 1 action for each party member and hit auto. The main reason I decided to play through it again for this video was because I got bored of the game the first time around, but still wanted to beat it. So for the majority of the time I spent with it, I was distracted by something else. By riding through my second playthrough, I figured I'd be sure to give it a fairer shake, since so many people came to its defense. I think this is probably about the point I stopped focusing on the game. Let's see what the rest of it has to offer. The monk's name is Yang, and he's the leader of the monks of Fabul. We fill him in on the plot and begin to suspect that Golbez may already be making his move on Fabul. One particularly notable aspect of the conversation is how Cecil is sure to state how he is responsible for the destruction of Rydia's village. His remorse is genuine, and he seems far from the man who slaughtered Mist in Mysidia, however unknowing or unwitting he was at the time. With Yang joining us, we have a full party of 5, and that is too many characters. Think of your favorite turn-based combat that isn't Final Fantasy IV. Assuming it's not a tactical RPG, you probably only have 3 or 4 party members out at a time. Dragon Quest XI, Persona 5, and about half of the other Final Fantasy games have 4 active characters in combat. Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, and the other half of Final Fantasy games have 3. They're good numbers that have worked for every other title in the series. Balancing combat like Final Fantasies is more difficult the more party members there are. Pokemon has one-on-one fights between roughly even characters. Not all Pokemon are created equal, but you can trust that in a Nuzlocke run, you can make anyone great. The more encounters between rest, the less even the two sides can be. In Final Fantasy, especially the early games, there are 2 types of challenges in combat, namely the endurance trial of making it through a dungeon and boss fights. You know what? I'm distracting myself from playing the game. I gotta focus. Suffice to say, I don't think they got the balance for 5 party members right, and that it's throwing a lot of characters at a player who could very well be learning the active time battle system for the first time. Back to it. We warned the King of Fabul about the imminent attack, since we're here before Golbez. The king doesn't trust us, but Edward's presence calms his down. We get the option to help defend Fabul or leave them to their fate. This is a false choice. If you opt to not help defend, the king will say that he can't really ask anything of you and you can leave. But the story won't progress until you go back to the throne room and agree to defend. Why give us the choice? Ostensibly, it's to give you a moment to prepare before the fight, but that's not how it's presented. Were that what they were going for, a better dialogue progression would be for Cecil to offer to help defend and the king to say something like, "Great, looks like we've got a bit of time to prepare, so do that and let me know when you're ready to take position." The defense is about as rough as you'd expect. Despite every fight being mind-numbingly easy, we have a fighting retreat, where we wipe the floor with an encounter and then fall back a room. All the way to the throne room, where one of the Fabul monks is revealed to be a Baron spy. This grand reveal happens because he unlocks the door. I'm sure the entire military might of Baron would have been held at bay otherwise. Edward trips and almost dies, and we move to the vault where the crystal lives. Cain appears and fights us. It's a shocking moment. Someone who was once our most ardent friend is now a fierce foe who wins the fight because the game says so. Cecil posits that Golbez has poisoned Cain's mind, and that's why he's acting like this. Makes sense to me, but I also remember when he was 100% down to kill a kid, so maybe he just thought fighting for Baron was his best bet. I could see it going either way. Rosa and Rydia, who had been manning the medic's tent for this fight, join us in the vault just in time to meet Golbez, who comes in after them. In a show of terrible strength, Golbez kills Yang and Edward, orders Cain around like a puppy, and kidnaps Rosa. He leaves Cecil bleeding out on the floor, but not fatally, I guess. Both Cain and Golbez seem to fully expect to go toe-to-toe with Cecil in the future. And Rydia, who's just been standing off to the side. She is a child. Golbez leaving her is odd, though I thought he wanted all the summoners gone. Perhaps he didn't recognize her. Rydia casts Cure, and psych, no one was dead. It was a trick. I deceived you. Cecil, Yang, and Edward lament their loss for a moment, but Rydia is able to galvanize them back to action with relative ease. The gang decides to infiltrate Baron and steal an airship, and in order to get there, the King of Fabul charters a ship for them. Things are looking up, but during the journey, Leviathan comes to say hello. Rydia falls off the edge of the boat, Yang jumps in after her, and Edward trips again. We wake up alone on a beach, and they are all definitely, probably dead. Turns out we washed up right next to Mysidia, the place Cecil slaughtered his way through right before the game started. It looks like it's doing alright. Most people are mean to you, which is kinda neat. The Elder is real quick to forgive and forget, though. He does say we have to go to Mount Ordeals to become a paladin, and this is right after the King of Fabul gave us a cool new sword. We also meet Palom and Param, a black and white mage respectively, who are ordered to help us. The Elder seems to think we have a great destiny before us and doesn't want us dying on the mountain. The twins have a lot of personality between them and serve as comic relief, which is good because all our friends definitely probably just died. Mechanically, they're glass cannons, real powerful but also pretty fragile. We get a meanwhile cutscene shortly after reaching Mount Ordeals where we see that Golbez has Rosa tied up like a cartoon villain. He summons a powerful subordinate because somehow he knows that Cecil is ascending the mountain in order to become a paladin, and doesn't want that to happen. We meet Tele further up the mountain cause, I don't know, why not? He's after the spell Meteor, and Mount Ordeals is apparently a great trial ground for whatever power-up you need. Could be a function of divinity? Maybe the mountain is a really big wish rock. Who's to say? At the top we meet a talking rock that calls Cecil its son and gives him a cool new sword, and now he's a paladin. Gets a sprite change and everything. We also beat Scarmiglione. I can't pronounce any of their names. Bear with me. The Fiend of Earth, I guess. I can't say it was a particularly exciting endeavor. You beat him twice and then he falls off a mountain. With the transformation to Paladin, the mysterious rock voice tells Cecil that he must overcome his inner darkness, and you fight Dark Knight Cecil as Paladin Cecil. The trick is not to attack because, as the game tells you, a true Paladin would sheath his sword. whatever that means. I thought we were doing this specifically to strike down true evil. The one thing the Elder Mysidia said we couldn't do as a Dark Knight. Tele also conveniently remembers Meteor, a spell which will kill him if he casts it, but which he believes is necessary if he's to defeat Golbez. Porum wants to tell us some secret that the twins have been keeping, but Tele is too drunk on power to sit still for more than a second. Cecil wonders about his real dad, the Rock, but follows the gaggle of mages to Baron. Despite having been almost level 20 as a Dark Knight, Cecil is now only a level 1 Paladin, which is a neat touch. The trip down the mountain is much easier than the path up. As a Dark Knight, most enemies resisted Cecil's basic attack, forcing him to use the HP-consuming Darkness spell, lest he be relegated to item duty. But now, his Paladin attacks carve through them like butter, and Tele also knows every spell now. It is, I think, the best bit of gameplay narrative in this game. Despite his increased effectiveness against the undead, Cecil is markedly weaker against all other enemies. We return to Mysidia, where the Elder reveals that the twins were spying on Cecil, though I'm not sure what they plan to do if he wasn't earnest in wanting to be a paladin. And that Cecil is probably the hero of an old Mysidian prophecy. It's fine, it's an old fantasy prophecy. It mentions a being of darkness and light, that'd be Cecil now that he's a paladin, and talks about the moon. Also, I guess one of Cecil's parents is a dragon? Here's my main problem with the prophecy. It calls Cecil a being of darkness and light, but he is now purely a being of light. He's chased out his darkness in favor of being a paladin. Were you able to swap Cecil between being a paladin and a Dark Knight, I think I would like this game a fair bit more than I do. It would at least be a single interesting choice for the player. You're a stronger damage dealer as a Dark Knight, but you need to make sure Paladin is leveled since you'll need it against any undead, and Golbez, the terribly competent villain who will definitely be the final boss. That's not the case though. Cecil is now a paladin, and that's that. The Elder makes the second mention of some seal on the spell Meteor, but Tele doesn't care about his exposition and interrupts the conversation, lest we learn anything interesting about this world. The Elder permits us use of the Devil's Road, which is a room that teleports us directly into Baron. Again, hinting at an interesting history without going into any real detail. In the inn, we find Yang. Surprise, he's not dead, but he is brainwashed. It turns out the cure for brainwashing is hitting them real hard. A true paladin would sheath their sword. Back to his usual self, Yang joins the party once more, informing us that he's not sure what happened to Edward, but Rydia was swallowed by Leviathan, so she's definitely dead. Luckily for us, they gave Yang a key to the castle. Well, an abandoned waterway, but it's close enough. Bagan, the slimy narc from the start of the game, joins our party for about half a second before Palin and Porum call him out for being an obvious spy. It's a good moment for the twins, but why play the new party member jingle? Why go out of your way to try and make the player think that maybe Bagan isn't a greasy narc if you're just going to show your hand before the cutscene ends? It's because Final Fantasy IV is a pathological liar, but we'll get more into that a bit later. Like right now! See, it's not great. We defeat Bagan and continue on to the throne room. I think we're supposed to be looking for Cid, but I actually don't know this castle all that well. We didn't spend a lot of time here. We see the king, and he gets maybe 3 lines out before revealing that he's actually Cognazzo, and he's been impersonating the king for some time. A sneak attack would have been more effective. Cid conveniently arrives just as we defeat Cognazzo, who was far easier than Bagan, and I mean, I guess I would have been wandering around aimlessly if he hadn't appeared, so this is whatever, I guess. The scene is supposed to demonstrate how capable Cid is, but if he's so capable, why did he agree to build a murder airship that he didn't want to? You could say that they threatened his family, but he charged into the throne room, ready to beat up the acting king. I don't think he cared about any threats they had. Cid, being a rude dude, makes fun of Tele's age, and Palom, also being a rude dude, makes fun of Cid's. It's all very funny, I'm sure. Cid begins to lead us towards his airship. I'm not clear on whether this is the murder one or not, and Cognazzo, presumably with his last breath, locks the doors and causes the walls to close in on us. So Palom and Param do the only reasonable thing and turn themselves to stone to stop the walls. Truly, a locked door is the greatest force in the world of Final Fantasy IV. Couldn't have broken it down with Yang's strength, or burned it down with either Tele or Palom's fire, or I'm sure Cid could have done something, break the lock with a hammer maybe. Nope, Cid's about to join us, and that would put us at 6 party members. Gotta write some of them out, lest the player have a single interesting choice to make vis-a-vis party construction. Heck, they could have had Yang break down the door and then sit out for a few fights to heal up if they were worried about us not using Cid. The twins sacrifice themselves and we continue on. Tele does attempt to use Asuna, the spell that would normally cure the stone status, but the game tells us that since they did it to themselves willingly, it doesn't work. That's awful, terrible reasoning. If you cast Bio on yourself, you can also cast Asuna on yourself, or any status effect, really. But this is what the story demands. I don't expect the same level of narrative freedom from a video game that I do from a tabletop game, but this is still an awful railroad moment. We swear vengeance on Golbez and get another meanwhile scene. Golbez is already aware of Cognatsu's defeat, and is unsure of how to get the last crystal. Kain suggests getting Cecil to retrieve it for them in exchange for Rosa, who is still comically tied up behind them. Golbez calls the idea primitive because he's so smart, and that's why he didn't think of it first, and agrees. Cid leads the gang to his airship, which is hidden, according to him, in plain sight, in a secret underground hangar. Kain appears once we get in the air and delivers the terms which we agree to pretty much immediately. We head to Troya, but someone else has already stolen the crystal and has hidden in a magnetic cavern, so metal weapons won't be of any use. We'll worry about that in a second though, because Edward is also in Troya. Surprise, he survived. Rydia though, definitely still super dead, you better believe it. He gives us a twin harp that I'm sure will matter later, but for now, we've got to take Cecil's sword away from him and head towards the magnetic cavern. I find an enemy in the woods. It's called a Hell Needle, and it's a stronger variant of an enemy we've seen before. This type of enemy's gimmick is the power of overwhelming power. Specifically, it has an ability called Needle, which it might use on its turn, but will definitely use as a counter to taking damage. You have to one-shot it, or it'll carve a chunk of health off. In an effort to speed through the game, I have not done any grinding, and the game's been easy enough that it hasn't been a problem. At this point, however, Tele is the only character that can one-shot these enemies. I didn't want to overlevel, but I couldn't find a level guideline for the areas in Final Fantasy IV. I did find a screenshot of the upcoming boss fight that had Cecil and Yang at a little over 1,000 health each, so I do a training montage and aim for that. When I first began my trek towards the magnetic cavern, Cecil was at level 17, and I managed to get him up to level 22 before getting bored of the whole endeavor. Grinding is only fun if combat itself is fun, and 4 does not have good combat. I normally refer to these as interesting choices, but that would give this game too much credit. Most combat encounters up till now could be solved in the first turn. I set everyone to an action that they'll perform for the rest of the fight and press auto. After a bit, I win. Most random encounters, since they're an endurance trial of many combats rather than a single difficult challenge, are solved easily by setting everyone to attack, even the mages. They don't do anything, but they also don't waste MP for fights that need it. Encounters with Hell Needles require me to do something different, but it's not an interesting different thing. Since Tele is the only one that can one-shot them, I have everyone else focus on any other enemies that might appear, and then wait for Tele. We head to the Chocobo Forest north of Troya and get a black Chocobo. These can fly over forests and water, and most importantly, can only land in forests. We need one because the magnetic cavern is on an entirely forested island that the airship cannot land on. There is absolutely no reason for this. The black Chocobo serves no other purpose than to get you to this one area. I could excuse it if there was a single other use, but no, just this one. This game makes me so tired. Does anyone actually genuinely like this game? It's okay if it's nostalgia, you can tell me. We all have that one game we played as a kid that we still enjoy, even though it's an objectively bad game. My first time playing through this game, which is the footage you're seeing by the way, it didn't seem worth it to record a second playthrough. I played through as a completionist, getting every chest, every hidden item, and doing every side quest. This time, I'm ignoring everything but the main story, so I'm skipping a lot of chests and I'm certainly weaker than I was. I waltz through the cavern straight to the boss, who beats us because the game wants to be dramatic. His first move is every elemental spell at its highest level, targeting every party member. The party drops. Cecil laments not being able to use his sword, and Edward trips out of bed, somehow aware of our imminent deaths. He plays a song on his harp, which is transmitted to the twin harp he gave us earlier, with his bardic magic of, from what I gather from the text, annoying the boss so much that it can't concentrate on maintaining the magnetic field. Cecil is able to use his sword, and everyone can wear metal armor once more. I would have preferred them concoct an actual plan. We spoke to Edward, and while he was bedridden, I'm sure we could have hashed something out. He hands over the harp and says, "Pluck a string when you get to the boss. I have a trick that'll help." And then, because the harps are linked, when one of his attendants notices the harp makes music, they can wake Edward and he'd be like, "Hey, it's time to go," and then we get the drop on the boss. This is still a good moment, don't get me wrong, especially with the use of Edward's theme taking over as the track that plays. But it's so easy to imagine a world in which it was better. Virtually nothing changes, but our heroes feel a bit more competent, overcoming overwhelming odds with their teamwork instead of almost dying and being saved by Deus Ex Edward. We fight the boss again and he's much weaker, though he does have a tornado skill that drops a character to a single digit of health, because, you know, why not? He turns into a dragon partway through the fight, also, cause why not? And I realized that I forgot to move Cecil to the front row. He'd been using a bow while his sword was unavailable. It doesn't matter, and auto battle wins again with Tele on Cura all duty. With the Earth Crystal in hand, Kain takes us to the Tower of Zot, where Golbez alters the deal and has us fight our way to the top, where it is strongly implied that Rosa's life is in danger. We make it through with ease and fight the Magus Sisters, which takes slightly longer than it needed to because I forgot which one casts full life when the others die. We give Golbez the crystal, and can you believe it, he doesn't free Rosa. I'm shocked. Enraged, Tele has a cutscene fight with Golbez. His regular spells seem to have little effect on Golbez, so he sacrifices himself to cast Meteor, and Golbez's battle sprite disintegrates. His overworld sprite is fine though. Tele dies, but it turns out that Meteor did free Kain from mind control. It's not nothing, I guess. Golbez promises to kill Cecil eventually, but not today, despite having the power to send Cecil flying across half the screen. Cecil also wonders why Golbez hesitates. This is foreshadowing. It's not good, and is in fact the worst aspect of Golbez is nothing of a character, but we'll get to that later. It turns out Tele isn't quite dead. He laments losing himself to his hatred, but does ask us to carry out his vengeance all the same. We wake Kain up and rescue Rosa right as a guillotine drops. It's all very dramatic, but it did come a bit out of left field. I know Golbez said something bad might happen to Rosa if we weren't fast, but I didn't think he'd engineered a death trap. Maybe lead with that next time? I don't know. I've never been a cartoon villain. Kain was aware of his actions, though he had no control over them, and still feels responsible. Everyone else takes the reasonable stance that he wasn't the one doing it, so it's fine. And both Kain and Rosa join us. Another elemental fiend appears out of nowhere to jump us, and this is probably the most interesting fight so far, but that's not really a high bar. Like the Needlers, you've got to be careful of attacking. The boss has two forms, a person form and a tornado form. The tornado form is powerful, but Barbaricia can be kicked out of it with Kain's jump skill, and given that she uses Tornado and Ray, two skills that reduce a party member to single-digit health and starts gradual petrification, the fight alternates between all-out attack and everyone but Kain focusing on healing. In a last-ditch effort to get rid of us, Barbaricia blows up the tower, and Rosa teleports us out. Another option which Porom and Tele could have used to get us out of the hallway. Every other dungeon has made a semblance of sense to me, but I don't know what the Tower of Zot is. The wiki tells me that it's Golbez's base of operations for the first part of the game, and we do see it in those meanwhile scenes, though we didn't know what or where it was. It also doesn't appear anywhere on the overworld, and then they just kind of blow it up. They wanted their big bad to be associated with the mechanical and artificial, and that's fine, but the Tower of Zot is an absolute waste of potential. Remember how we knew exactly where the Emperor was pretty much at all times in 2, but couldn't do anything about it either because we were too weak or he had a barrier up around his location? That would have been better. The Tower of Zot should have been visible on the world map, and when we get the airship, a force field or Barbaricia's winds should have repelled us. It would have given us a better incentive to accept the proposal of a trade, as it would have been our opportunity to invade their base. We could be aware of the fact that Golbez probably wouldn't honor his end of the deal, but still find merit in at least pretending to accept. I know hindsight is 20/20, but at every story beat, it is so easy to imagine how it could have been vastly improved. At best, this game hints at a good story, but so far doesn't itself have one. We've rescued Kain and Rosa, but we've lost Tele. Palom and Porom are statues in Baron's castle, and Rydia was eaten by a big fish. In addition, Golbez now has all 4 crystals, and whatever devious plans he has can finally begin. Psych! Kain reveals that there are actually more. The Dark Crystals, as he calls them. Sid claims that it makes sense since their world has the Light Crystals. Sid is posturing, pretending to be smarter than he is. Kain's other revelation is that the Hollow Earth theory is true, and there's another world beneath their feet, and that when all the crystals are gathered, the path to the moon will open. I cannot take this game seriously. The airship conveniently flies itself back from the tower. It'd be awful if we had to go on a journey to rescue it ourselves, perhaps to create a feeling of tangible time passing between fleeing the tower and reaching the underworld. That feeling is supposed to be from searching for the entrance, but when flying around searching for places to grind, I found a town called Agartha. And I happen to know that the kingdom that rules the Hollow Earth is called Agartha, so I know exactly where to go. And spoilers, when we get to the underworld, Golbez will already have 2 of the 4 dark crystals, despite us being right on his tail. I would hate for tangible time to have passed where we traveled on foot to help explain that. Every single story beat. We drop a magma rock down a well and blow up an entire mountain range. I don't know what Cecil was thinking when he did that. Someone somewhere probably recounts a legend we reenact, but I never spoke to them. The underworld sure has a lot of magma, and also the Red Wings are already down here. Yang wonders how they beat us here, given we had to blow a giant hole in the planet's crust, but no one gives him the time of day. It's not cute to point out your own plot holes. You just make it glaringly obvious, and now I have to keep playing. Anyway, the Red Wings are fighting some tanks and we get caught in the crossfire. Our emergency landing is conveniently 2 steps away from civilization. You can chalk it up to Sid's skill, but I'd hate for the feeling of tangible time to pass to explain Golbez's rapid crystal collection. We talk to the Dwarven King, who debriefs us on the situation. Sid leaves to repair the airship, and Yang notices someone spying right as the king announces where one of the 2 remaining crystals is hidden. He lets us into the crystal room because he's incredibly trusting, I guess, and we find dolls plotting to steal the crystal. We beat up the dolls, but they relay the crystal's location to Golbez, who teleports directly into the room. He reveals that once he has all 8 crystals, he's going to go to the moon to gain power beyond comprehension, despite ostensibly already being the strongest person in existence. He wipes the floor with all of us. All of our attacks miss, and he paralyzes everyone and summons a dragon to cast instant death on everyone but Cecil. But then Rydia appears. Surprise, she's alive. She summons a mist dragon to get rid of Golbez's and casts Asuna on Cecil, and now the boss fight can really begin. Rydia basically solos while Cecil tries to get everyone back on their feet in time to get experience for the fight. We defeat Golbez and Rydia explains what happened to her. Leviathan took her to the Land of Summons, where all the monsters she can summon live. Time flows differently there, and now she's all grown up and unable to cast healing magic. Incredible summoning power, though. The Queen of Summons sent her back to her own world because a secret force is at work, our second bit of foreshadowing, and Rydia rejoins the party. Golbez rejects death and turns into a hand. He crawls around a bit and then steals the crystal. It was better when the Emperor overcame death. That was a cool moment. The king concocts a plan to have us go steal the crystals Golbez has already collected from the Tower of Babel, while his forces distract Golbez's over by the location of the last crystal, protected for now by a magic seal. We go through a secret passage and walk right by some tanks that are actively firing on the tower. Within, we do go a bit out of our way to collect 2 ice-based weapons for an upcoming fight. Not this fight, though. Partway up the tower, we meet Dr. Lugai and Rubicante. The latter is the last remaining of the 4 fiends, and the first is a random mad scientist. They really like throwing random bosses at us. Dr. Lugai isn't a character, he's a boss battle. He has no place in the world, no role to fill other than as the boss for this dungeon. Because the tower is sci-fi themed, he is sci-fi themed. Does anyone who played this game really remember Dr. Lugai, or the Octomammoth, or the Antlion, or the Mom Bomb, or the Dark Elf? These bosses only exist because it would feel weird to have a dungeon without a final challenge to overcome. The Octomammoth and Antlion at least lived in places we had to go through. The Mom Bomb was set on Yang as a roundabout assassination, but the Dark Elf and Lugai exist because game design says they should. Something needs to be waiting for us at the end of the magnetic cave, and something needs to be waiting for us at the end of this section of the tower. I'm fine with most of those bosses. As forgettable as they are, they make sense in the world, and as monsters are more forces of nature than proper characters. The Dark Elf and Lugai, however, imitate being a character, but are similar game necessities. If Lugai appeared in a single scene before being a boss battle, this would be alleviated, but no, we meet him here, we beat him, and we forget about him. Before he fades into obscurity, he reveals that there are cannons firing on the dwarves, something I didn't gather from the screen shakes earlier, and we steal his key and go to resolve that particular situation. I like that it's goblins manning the cannons, incredibly weak enemies from the start of the game. They are sturdy enough to destroy the controls after we beat them, claiming that nothing can stop the cannons now, and Yang pushes the rest of us out of the room, locking himself within. It's unclear to me exactly what is happening and how this is helping, but Yang, I guess, causes the cannons to self-destruct in order to stop the bombardment. He's definitely, probably dead for real this time. We haven't accomplished our objective or been given any kind of other reason, but we leave the tower because that's what we're supposed to do now. Golbez almost drops us into the underworld's plethora of lava, but Sid saves us with our airship at the last second. We lament Yang's definite death, but soon find ourselves pursued by one of the Red Wings. Their airship is faster and sturdier than ours. We make haste for the entrance to the overworld, and Sid decides to sacrifice himself, jumping from the airship and detonating a bomb in midair over the underworld's abundance of lava in order to seal the entrance and stop the Red Wings' pursuit. He is definitely, probably dead. Could you imagine if the game was so infatuated with its own characters that it couldn't let them die? Back in the surface world, we lament the loss of a second companion to an underworld explosion and continue our journey to Baron, as Sid had urged just before jumping. Baron's engineers attach a claw to the airship so we can carry the Hovercraft from way back when. allowing us to get to the next part of the story. We go through a cave to get to the upper part of the tower, which I guess we couldn't access before. We find refugees from Eblon here, a place we heard Rubicante talking about wiping out. There's a wrecked castle with some loot we could have explored, but that I ignored in this playthrough. The Eblon Prince Edge has gone on ahead, and some soldiers seem worried about him. We find him later in the cave confronting Rubicante. He is, of course, introduced with a cutscene battle where he is easily defeated by the Fiend of Fire. Despite just getting absolutely wrecked, Edge is adamant about pursuing his vengeance solo until Rydia cries about the loss of Tele, Yang, and Cid, not wanting any more people to die. Love-struck, Edge agrees to our help and joins the party. We go through more of the tower and meet Edge's parents. They're alive, kinda. Lugai apparently turned them into monsters, a fact which I forgot because the game makes no effort into making Lugai a character. Rubicante, however, gets some great characterization here. He decries Lugai's methods and heals the party before the fight. He also doesn't do a just barely beyond the grave murder attempt like all the other fiends. And if you're thinking that Scarmione didn't pull any shenanigans, he did briefly come back from the dead after his first defeat. Cognazzo collapsed a hallway on us, and Barbaricha collapsed a tower on us, all to varying degrees of success, unless you're counting casualties. Edge ignores his newfound responsibilities as king, despite his parents saying that Eblin would be in good hands, and opts to join us in our hunt for Golbez. I still don't have a sense of a solid plan. I guess we're still on the Dwarf King's plan of stealing back the crystals, or maybe our heroes think that they'll be able to win the next time they meet him. The game feels aimless. We get to the crystal room and Cecil immediately declares it's a trap, and we drop back down to the underworld portion of the tower dungeon. We stumble across an airship hangar in this part of the tower and steal it. We return to the Dwarf King in order to report our failure, and he tells us that Golbez is trying to tear down the seal by force. His next brilliant plan is to have us go there and break the seal. Golbez definitely won't be able to make it in if we do that, and I'm sure there's a more secure place for the dwarves to hide it, like behind the throne. There is one slight snag in that our newly acquired airship can't fly over lava. Never mind the cutscene earlier where one of those bad boys did just that. If only Cid were alive. Oh, guess what? He is, and he's sleeping in the castle's basement, cause of course he is. Why wouldn't he still be alive after blowing himself up over the lava sea? He does not explain how he survived because there is no good explanation. They're treating it as a joke now. Cid springs out of bed and drags his attendants along to help work on the airship, and everyone's like, yeah, he seems fine. If that had been their response after his apparent self-sacrifice, if everyone had been, yeah, he's probably fine, this would have been okay. The engineers back at Baron are in on the joke. They say that they can't imagine Cid being killed by anything. But the party wasn't. The game wanted it to feel like an intense emotional moment, but it couldn't bring itself to kill off one of its favorite characters. And the moment is robbed. It's now a cheap shot and a lie, and it tries to do it again immediately. After the work is done, Cid says we're good to go, and then he gets a ... line. Someone screams his name, and the game plays a sad stinger. And then he starts snoring. We go to the sealed cavern and unseal it. There are a lot of trapdoors in this dungeon, not like what dropped us from the top of the Tower of Babel, more like a mimic door that attacks you when you try to open it. These doors size up their foe and then instantly kill them after a second. Great if you want to store something and not have it stolen later. We clear the path for Golbez though, opening all the doors and even one wall. The Demon Wall is a legitimately thrilling fight, the best in the game so far, and from what I remember of the rest of the game, the best overall. It's a great fight. The wall slowly advances across the screen, something which monsters just do not do. It makes its inexorable march towards you, and the stakes rise. For the first time since I started this playthrough, I was watching the ATB bar with bated breath. Once the wall reaches you, it can instantly kill one party member and will keep doing so until you wipe. I imagine this is how they've wanted every boss fight to feel, and maybe a few random encounters, but unfortunately, it's the only one in the game. I don't remember this fight as fondly from my first playthrough, the footage you're watching, and I think it's because before going into this dungeon, I did a lot of side questing. In that playthrough, I was level 50 when I fought this boss. Mainlining the main quest this time around, I was only level 35, which would certainly make fights a bit more tense. Miraculously, Golbez doesn't swoop in and steal the crystal in our post-boss fight state. That would have been my first bet. My second bet would be that Golbez is waiting for us outside, post-boss fight and post-dungeon traversal. But thanks to 4's love of needless curveballs with no foreshadowing, Golbez remote controls Kain to steal the crystal, and none of us try to stop him. I mean, the party says stop, wait, don't go, but no one tries to throw hands. And just like that, Golbez has all 8 crystals and can finally go to the moon. We return to the Dwarf King to let him know of our failure again, and he shares with us the legend of the Lunar Whale. I can't believe that this man, who had no reason to trust us in the first place, still thinks we're capable of doing anything. We have to return to Mysidia so we can ride a space whale to the moon. But remember how Sid sealed the entrance to the overworld in his attempted suicide bombing? Don't worry about it. He's going to attach a drill and we'll dig our way out. It's almost like that event had no consequences, no meaning, and shouldn't have happened at all. I guess he is too weak to join us, but he's a bad combat member anyway, so he would have been benched as soon as possible. We return to Mysidia and pray the lunar whale into existence. We fly straight to the moon and somehow don't immediately die to its inherent inhabitability. But we do wipe to the first random encounter. Remember how last time I said I was level 50 around this point? I suddenly feel those 15 levels quite acutely. Time for another training montage, I guess. Now's as good a time as any, I suppose. This is optional content, but remember how Yang also blew up? Turns out he's fine too. The Sylphs are caring for him, and if you run between Yang's unconscious body and his wife in Fabul enough times, you can wake him up with a frying pan. We get Excalibur, we get all of Rydia's cool summons, not the rare drops that are less than worthless, and we get those levels and then some. We tackle the moon once more and make it to the Crystal Tower. Wait, wrong game. The Blue Spire. Inside we meet Fusoya, all capital consonants, and he reveals that he protects the slumber of the Lunarians, the moon people. We also get the worst lore drop. Long ago, a planet between Mars and Jupiter was on the verge of destruction, and the inhabitants escaped to the blue planet. The fantasy world is Earth. You know how Earth is hollow and has magic? It was cool when Planet of the Apes did it, because that was the point. It does not work when Shannara or Final Fantasy IV do it. Whatever. FF4 takes place on Earth. There was a planet between Mars and Jupiter, but maybe not anymore. And the Moon people, formerly of the maybe now destroyed planet, didn't want to interfere with the Earth's development, and so did the next most logical thing and built the moon to sleep in until who knows when. All except one, who said, "Hey, this is bonkers, let's just take the planet for ourselves." Fusoya made the executive decision to not let him do that and sealed him away, forcing him into a deep sleep. You know how they were from a planet between Mars and Jupiter? Why didn't they just settle on Mars? It's probably closer to whatever their planet was like, at least atmosphere-wise. I'm pretty sure Mars is still in the Goldilocks zone. It's a bit more barren, but Fusoya's words for this rogue Lunarian's plan were to, quote, raise the Earth and build a new world. Mars is already raised, just gotta build it up. Fusoya goes on to say that he did a bad job sealing away this bad apple, and that he can still channel his being to corrupt people on Earth, and that he's been using them to gather the crystals. Surprise! Golbez, the terrifyingly competent villain, is just being mind-controlled. Like Cain, whom Golbez had mind-controlled. Golbez, a legitimately terrifying force, an inexorable agent of death and destruction, suddenly has no character. He's just a puppet, being controlled by a sleeping old moon person named Zemus. This 11th hour villain's plan is to destroy Earth as FF4 knows it, and remake it to suit the Lunarians. They all fit in the moon. They could definitely fit on Mars. Fusoya also clues us into the existence of Kluya, capital K and Y, but not L, a Lunarian who traveled to Earth and invented the Devil's Road, that thing we used once, and airships, which have had a substantially larger presence. Earth did have airplanes, or well, I'm unclear when this is supposed to be. Realistically, it's an Earth AU, and that makes FF4 fanfiction. Do with that what you will. You know, we've got 3 Lunarian names, and one has 3 capital letters, one has 2, and the last has 1. What's up with that? This last section has been a bit disconcerted. I understand, but I have to do this, because the alternative is pulling out my hair and screaming. This is the worst part of an already bad game. It's a fever dream based on a 9-year-old's list of radical ideas, and we haven't even gotten to the giant robot. There's no cohesion, no rhyme, no reason. It's a series of people saying, wouldn't it be cool if, and never attempting to justify or make it make sense. And I have to ask again, is this game so beloved because you played it when you were 9? When this game checked off every item on your list of radical ideas, it's fine if that's the case. But don't fight me when I say this is objectively the worst Final Fantasy game. For a series that places its story at the forefront, this one makes no attempt at having one. We're left with a bad trip and boring turn-based-ish combat. We learn that Kluya is Cecil's father. You gotta have a super special protagonist for your fanfiction. I'm sorry, I don't mean to rag on fanfiction. I don't even really mean to rag on Cecil. He's a decent character and he has a genuinely good character arc. It just ended atop Mount Ordeals, a third of the way into the story. Fusoya joins our party and tells us we've gotta return to the Tower of Babel to stop the Giant of Babel, the aforementioned giant robot, from reaching the blue planet. If you go into the room behind Fusoya's chair, you'll see the 8 moon crystals. Why wouldn't there be 8 moon crystals? There's a crystal on the lunar whale. Everything gets a crystal. I think it's safe to say they're an energy source. Seems to make the most sense, what with the whale. We're too late getting back because these are the least competent heroes you'll ever meet, and the giant robot appears to begin the painful process of terraforming an inhabited planet. Some dwarven tanks roll up on it, not sure how they got to the surface, and we see inside one to where their king is in command, with his small daughter at his side. Right on the front lines. Why didn't you leave her at home, my guy? There's a giant robot with a very dangerous laser. I didn't rescue Yang this playthrough, but he does still appear driving a tank, with even less explanation for how he survived than we would have gotten otherwise. Sid comes in with a fleet of airships to continue the assault from the air. He at least didn't bring his daughter, and Palom and Horam arrive on a different ship. They're back. I guess their petrification wore off. Let's see, Cain disappears after young Rydia summons Titan way back at the beginning of the game. Cecil opts to not worry, trusting in his friend, but there's an air of, what if he's dead? Next up, Anna dies for real in Damcyan, then Yang and Rydia go overboard, with Rydia notably being eaten by a giant fish, and Edward goes down with the ship. Palom and Porum turn themselves to stone and cannot be turned back. The game even lets you go back and try again when you return to Baron, and gives you the same message. Tele dies casting Meteor, Yang explodes, and Sid explodes and falls into lava. Of those 10 ostensible deaths, only 2 of them were real, and only 1 of those was for a party member. 2 did it better. Back on board with the twins, they reveal that the Elder saved them. Why not? The sage Tele couldn't do it, greatest mage alive. Rosa can't do it, strongest white mage around. But the Elder of Mysidia did it. Why not? It's supposed to be a heartwarming moment. You know, the end of the Adventure Zone balance, when they cut to all the people the party had met up, joining together to fight this new threat. It's supposed to be like that, I think, but it doesn't land. Mostly because I'm so mad about them doing the fake death thing 8 different times. The giant is also confused, as noted by one of the party characters, and we use the opening to take it down. Sid is curious about Fusoya and what a Lunarian is, but Cecil doesn't have the time to explain the world's bad lore, and his inquiries are blown off. Instead, a cool boss fight against a giant robot, we get another dungeon, themed very similarly to the Tower of Zot and both halves of the Tower of Babel. It's fine for some thematic cohesion between these dungeons. It's actually a good thing. What isn't good is that they aren't distinct. They all look kind of the same and feel kind of the same. There's also a random Loporrit in this giant robot. Loporrits are rabbit people. There's one called Naming Way who will change your character's name that pops up all over the place. Actually, they might be called Hummingways in this game, their first appearance. But Loporrit, their name in 14, is much better, so that's what I'm going to use. They live on the moon. I'm too existentially exhausted to look into if there's a reason. We fight the 4 fiends again. Apparently, Zemus brought them back to life, so add them to the list, I guess. Rubicante's still a bro and heals us before the fight. We fight them all back to back in one admittedly cool continuous fight. We don't have Cain to use jump against Barbaricia, so from the lessons learned in our previous encounter with her, we should be unable to win. But that rule is just kind of ignored. They don't even keep her in her vulnerable form. She comes out as a tornado and we can damage her like usual. They're gone as quickly as they arrive, but they don't try to crash the hallway around us, probably because Zemus wants the robot intact. We then go and fight the giant's CPU, its central processing unit, which takes the form of a big orb. It makes the most sense that this is how a group of 5 people would destroy a giant terraforming robot, but it feels bad. We destroy the CPU and Golbez comes out to admonish us. Fusoya manages to free him from Zemus' control, and we learn that Golbez is also Kluya's son and Cecil's brother. This revelation makes me happy that I did play through this again, because I could have sworn we learned this back at Mount Ordeals, and if I had included that in my reasoning for why this is a bad game, people would have focused on that and dismissed everything else. Cecil is distraught that he could hate his own brother so much, but when your brother is doing war crimes, I think it's fine. And he was able to forgive Cain easily enough by realizing it was Golbez doing those things, not Cain. This is literally the same situation. We just don't know a non-mind controlled Golbez to know if he's good or not. Fusoya mentions that Golbez's Lunarian blood made him much easier for Zemus to control, but why stop with just one brother? Taking both Cecil and Golbez seems like it would have clinched the win for old Zemus. Anyway, remember who brutally efficient Golbez was? His terrifying and inexorable march towards victory? That's nothing now. He was just being mind-controlled. It would have been so much better for Zemus to whisper in Golbez's ear and convince him to turn against the people of Earth rather than just take over. If he had made these misguided decisions on his own, perhaps poisoned by Zemus' honeyed words, Golbez would be a much better character. He gets to retain his terror and get redeemed when Cecil and friends convince him that Zemus' way is not the best way, probably when Fusoya arrives and tells Golbez the truth of what the Lunarians, and especially Kluya, actually wanted. But nope. Instead, we erase everything of Golbez's character that had been established up till now, and Cecil struggles with having a war criminal for a brother, even though we learned back on the moon that Golbez wasn't in control. Golbez declares that he's inherently evil and that's why Cecil wasn't chosen and runs off, despite, Cecil being a Dark Knight at the start of the game. Golbez runs off lest he develop a character. Fusoya goes with him so that they can confront Zemus and put an end to this. Everyone immediately realizes that those two are going to die and are on board with helping Golbez out, consistently understanding how mind control works. This is the smartest the party has ever been and will ever be. Cecil is still a little hung up on having a war criminal for a brother, and that he hated said war criminal brother. Cecil is about to go down with the robot, and then Kane appears, offering to help them out. Edge briefly forgets how mind control works, but the gang still gets out alright. The game doesn't even pretend to kill off any characters. Kane attempts to be as edgy as Edge's name, and says that if he betrays them again, Edge gets to kill him. Cecil tries to tell Rosa and Rydia they can't go, despite Rydia being the strongest member of the party, and Rosa the vastly superior healer than him. It's an attempt at chivalry, but it is an act of absolute idiotic misogyny. Or maybe he's hoping to team up with Golbez and Fusoya, but has realized that the game only allows 4 other people to journey with him at a time. That would be infinitely better. It's the other thing. The two seem to leave the whale, but have actually stowed away. Can we count this as 2 more fakeouts? It takes 5 seconds between thinking Rosa and Rydia were left behind and learning that they did not, and you do not resume control of Cecil in that time frame. Rosa demands that he take her along, and Cecil promises to protect her. They hug, and I think I threw up a little. Rydia pops out and reminds them that she is the strongest member of their party, and we can continue on to the final dungeon, finally. We go through the moon and get one last cutscene fight where Golbez and Fusoya kill Zemus. The alien doesn't even do anything, and they kill Zemus. But wait, there's an alien ghost now, and his name is Zeromus for some reason. Golbez and Fusoya queue up for round 2, but have much less luck. Meteor heals Zeromus, and when Golbez attempts to use the crystal, because I guess it's not just an energy source, it doesn't work because Golbez chose the path of evil. Now, to be fair, we don't know who Golbez is, at all. So it's possible he did choose evil. But the only evil we know him to have done was orchestrated by Zemus, who did not convince Golbez to choose evil, but just took control and did it himself. Again, we don't know who Golbez is. This might still make sense. All we have is him saying that there were seeds of evil in his heart, which is, notably, not him saying he chose evil. But Golbez isn't the protagonist, so he doesn't get to beat the big bad. He just gets to pretend with the warm-up. Palom and Porum are somehow aware that we're in danger. We had a few cutscenes where Golbez was inexplicably immediately aware of our actions, but I chalked it up to a spy, or honestly more likely a crystal ball. No clue how the twins know. But they get everyone to pray for us. The Elder prayed a whale into existence. He honestly probably prayed the twins out of their petrification, and this game does take place on Earth. Final Fantasy IV says one of the religions is correct, but does not tell us which one. The Elder does call to the moon to hear their prayers though, so do with that what you will. Everyone had been knocked down by the birth of the alien ghost, but with the prayers, Cecil is able to get up. Golbez hands him the crystal and the real final fight begins. We get a series of old characters appearing and giving us their power. Mechanically, this results in a revived party at full health. Cecil has to use the crystal first before the fight can begin. Zeromus won't even hurt you in this stage, though you can't hurt him either. He transforms after the crystal is used and we begin in earnest. There is an achievement for getting the final 5 playable characters to level 70, and I didn't get it the first time I played through, but I did this time. And if you do that, you can set Cecil to attack, Rosa to Karaja all, Kane to jump, Rydia to her strongest summon that you've acquired, and Edge to attack. Press auto, and win the final boss without any further input. I have a video of Wherein defeating the final boss of his game in 2 shots without taking any damage by exploiting the mechanics of that game. There is a sense of achievement still in that, in knowing a system well enough to break it. There are simply no interesting choices to make in forest combat even at the very end of the game. Every character only needs to do one thing and you'll win. Fusoya and Golbez get up because of course they didn't die and Zero Mist explodes. The game pretends it has a philosophical message to share, that it has anything of worth to say at all. Cecil doesn't immediately forgive his mind-controlled war criminal brother, and everyone pesters him about it, except Golbez, who's understanding. He goes off with Fusoya to sleep for a while, and whatever else the Lunarians are going to get up to. Edge pesters Cecil one last time, and Cecil calls Golbez his brother, which is like forgiveness, and they part ways. We get a cutscene of the Earth orbiting around the Sun, and it turns out that FF4's AU Earth has 2 moons, though Fusoya soon drives the moon somewhere else, presumably to Mars, where they should have tried settling down initially. We get a series of Where Are They Now cutscenes for all the main characters. The hero's journey is a full circle, and these are immensely boring. Palom and Porum's lives are unchanged. Edge is king now, though he doesn't act like it. Rydia is living in her new home, the Land of Summons. I actually like Yang's. He becomes the king of Fabul, and in his scene, we see the old king standing right next to the throne. What happened there? Edward is rebuilding Damcian. The dwarves are optimistic about the future, decommissioning their tanks. I'm actually surprised about this one. I thought it was going to be a playable characters only kind of deal. Cain stands on a mountain. He has blonde hair. A random observatory with a man named Corio inside watches the moon fly away. Who is Corio? Can you meet him in the game? Can you go to this observatory? Why did he get a name? Rosa and Cecil are also getting married, but I don't care about that. The cutscene is autoplaying, I can't stop it, but I've got to figure out who Corio is. Alright, I've looked it up. The wedding is happening, all the characters are assembling. It's a great feel-good moment, I'm sure. Corio and his observatory are in Agartha, a place I visited just long enough to drop a rock down a well. I didn't even enter any buildings. He stays there the whole game. This is wild. I know he facilitates the telling of Golbez and Fusoya's journey, but I had no idea he existed. The characters all just waved at the camera and credits are rolling. The game is finally over. I had planned, after the recap, to dive into the themes present, do a few character analyses for the ones that stood out, and talk about the gameplay proper. But I couldn't help myself from talking about all of those things during the retelling. If you're wondering, I don't remember hearing about any themes or character analyses. That's because the game doesn't have any themes or characters worth looking at. Honestly, at this point, I'm mostly tired. I don't want to think about Final Fantasy IV anymore. It does not merit the time I've spent just telling its story. If from all of this it is not self-evident why Final Fantasy IV is a bad game and deserving of the title of Worst Final Fantasy Game, I don't think I'll be able to convince you with anything else I have to say. So instead, I'll try to end on a more positive note. Wish me luck. I began this by talking about how 4 was chosen as the sequel to get localized. This was the title that they wanted to define the future of the series, and it definitely is that. There are a lot of elements here that are blueprints for future titles. You see it especially in the character focus. The characters of 4 get stories all their own. They have actual relationships with each other. 2 of them even get married. The Warriors of Light from 1 and 3 had no personality to speak of, and while 2 had actual characters, the story was more about their journey rather than them. Anyone could have filled their role. That's not a negative thing, by the way. I love 2, mostly because everyone hates it. The point of 2 is that anyone could have been the heroes of its story. The main characters start out barely able to survive an encounter against a single goblin. It's a phenomenal title. But 4 focused on the characters proper, and an excellent cast can get me invested in just about any story. Obviously, they didn't stick the landing here. Out of the 12 characters that cycle through the party, I can confidently say that I liked 2 of them. Cecil has a great character arc, and if he defeated Golbez right after Mount Ordeals, this might have been a decent game. And Rydia is great, not much of a story, and the game isn't interested in spending any real time with her growth, literally sending her off to another world for most of it. But she's good for the screen time she does get. Her slow forgiveness and growing trust of Cecil, and also she's the best character on the team for combat. Kain, Yang, and Fusoya don't really have characters outside of the roles they fill. Edge, Palom, and Param do have character, but they don't have growth. And we don't get to spend a lot of time with any of them. And I flat out just don't like Rosa, Edward, Sid, or Tele, which is a third of the cast for those keeping track. It also cements the villain behind the villain trope that crops up on occasion to varying success. That started with 3, but while it came out of nowhere in that one, you can tell that they at least thought about foreshadowing it here. There are exactly 2 moments where it seems like there might be something behind Golbez before Fusoya outright tells you. Maybe more if you talk to everyone, like Koryo, though I don't know if I'd recommend it. It also starts specialized characters. Every character here is good at a specific thing and uses specific equipment. That's similar to, say, 7, where characters are better suited for certain combat roles, but thanks to the materia system, you have much greater control over how the game actually plays. My final opinion of Final Fantasy IV is that it is an absolute hodgepodge of ideas. The game tries to do just about everything under the sun, especially when it comes to narrative twists. It's a real throw spaghetti at a wall kind of game, and enough stuff that they were able to iterate on and make into actually good Final Fantasy games. If you like Final Fantasy IV as a game or as a story, it's gotta be because you experienced it first when you were 9 years old and you cannot convince me otherwise, and that's okay. If you like 4 for setting the precedent that resulted in your actual favorite Final Fantasy, that's a reasonable position, but please understand that the game is objectively bad. Nothing is foreshadowed, no action has any consequence, the heroes are all terrible at saving the world, and not just initially, consistently throughout. The world is a hollow Earth, has alien moon people, is also actually Earth, and Cecil can't forgive his mind-controlled war criminal brother for doing war crimes while mind-controlled. At least not vocally. The game set up a battle between brothers by having both Cecil and Kain be raised by the King of Baron, and then forgot about it and treated them as just close friends, so that the brother showdown could be between Cecil and his blood relative Golbez, whom he didn't know existed until he started doing war crimes, while mind-controlled. Also, a fun fact I've learned, Golbez's original name is Theodore, and Cecil and Rosa named their son Theodore, after Cecil and his brother. Existence is pain. The game pretends to be about the inherent good and evil in everyone, a dichotomy represented by Cecil himself, or it would have been if he hadn't just outright eliminated all the darkness within himself when he became a paladin. As well as Cecil and Kain/Golbez, pick your favorite brother figure, Zero Mist dies but says that, like every other character in the game, he'll be back as long as evil exists in the hearts of people. Edge worries about this, and Fusoya pretends to give a philosophical lesson about how, while there will always be evil, there will also always be good to combat it. They can't exist without each other, and if the game hadn't forgotten that lesson it wanted to teach, maybe I would believe that the game has something to say. But again, Cecil is able to be wholly good. At no point do we see this internal struggle at play, with the exception of Cecil for about a third of the game. Characters are either good, comically evil, or being mind-controlled. Edgar Allan Poe spoke of a unity of effect, essentially that every aspect of a story must work in cohesion and unison if you want to be able to impact a reader. It's admittedly a lot easier for a short story, there are far less moving parts, but it's a good concept to keep in mind. In trying to do a little bit of everything, some sci-fi, some fantasy, some Hollow Earth, some alien, some good and evil existing in tandem, some good and evil absolutes, a love triangle we didn't get into because the game doesn't either. It's implied to be Kain's motivation for betrayal, but then it does turn out to just be mind control. character deaths, character miraculous recoveries. In trying to do all of that and more, the game lacks any sense of unity and lacks any kind of impact. At any given moment, the game does not care about what's coming next or what's just happened. Just about checking off the next item on the 9-year-old's list of radical ideas. In the which should you start with video, the only comment I really made about 4 was that playing it has made me a worse person. And this is what I'm talking about. I tried to end on a more positive note, but I cannot speak positively about this game. I do make a conscious effort to not be needlessly negative about things, especially things as subjective as art. So let's try wrapping this up one more time. Before I played 4, I would have figured people would place it solidly in the middle of their list of favorite Final Fantasy games. My impression was that it didn't make anyone's top 5, but neither did it fall to their bottom 5. A recent poll for the series' 35th anniversary confirms this sentiment, where Final Fantasy IV ranked as the people's 8th favorite. My experience with 4 has been that it's very easy to imagine it being better, to the extent that I genuinely thought the Cecil Golbez relation was revealed far earlier than it was, because you know how late it's revealed, it really plays no role other than a bet you didn't see this coming. Were it shown earlier, like after Mount Ordeals, then there's room in the story for some actual character development around this reveal. I wouldn't be surprised if the pieces of 4 that resonated with people underwent similar transformation. 4 attempts to do so much that there's probably a little something there for everyone. That it picks up and drops threads and ideas like sand should probably sour the experience, but if you're able to focus on a single thread, I can maybe see someone enjoying the game. Cecil's redemption arc happens in the first third of the game, but it's the sole reason he's able to defeat the 11th hour big bad. Which brings us to the real reason to remember Final Fantasy IV with any semblance of fondness, that it did set the template for the games to come. Every entry in the series since 4 carries a piece of that game. It was the first one to really focus in on the characters, to the extent where if you swap out any one of the many party members that cycle through, the story would probably end very differently. Final Fantasy IV is not a story about a mind-controlling moon alien attacking the Hollow Earth with a giant robot. It's about the people who rise to the occasion and save the day when that specific series of events happens. It is fine to hold the game in high regard for its place in Final Fantasy history as the sequel that figured out where the series would go and what paved the way for the truly great games of the series. But please recognize that as a standalone game, it's awful. I have been Atticus, and if you've made it this far, thank you, really, thank you for participating.